This painting is called as Our Class, the evolution and expressions of racism. This painting shows the embedded white supremacy and the racist laws that the US have been having for years until nowadays to keep away African American communities, Latin American communities from the country. This figure of the white man represents all of those laws, administrations, politicians, and citizens who were racist and didn't care about the situation of Black people or Latinx people or Native Americans people and what they have been experiencing due to these laws. The painting shows at first the institution of slavery, having Black people worked in cotton plantations during hard labor conditions, in the sun, in the rain, long hours, women being raped by white people. When the abolition of slavery was held, that didn't mean that different forms of slavery, other forms to practice racism became present, such as having the Jim Crow laws to segregate white people from Black people in every areas of society, such as education, transportation, job opportunities. In the continuous fight for their rights, Black men achieved to have voting rights as white men. However, this achievement left Black women behind, and that's why I'm showing the three people before the word sexism being Black women, last, next, white women, and after them, Black men. White women didn't want to collaborate with Black women because of racism. So instead, they will continue fighting for the women's rights alone. But these women's rights didn't include Black women. And that is why Black women felt left behind, even they were of the same gender as white women. And that is why Sojourner Truth, in her speech, said, "Ain't a woman?" Because Black women were women who were not supported by their semi-gender, sharing one common struggle. Also, at the same time they were experiencing racism, they experienced sexism, patriarchy, because they were told by Black men who already have voting rights to stay in the household, avoid the struggle, so they can support Black men who are going out to struggle, to fight for rights. Also, the word our history is important here. The words our histories are important here because that is the history of Black people. That hidden history that is not mentioned, that erasure of history that has not been told, and that is told by literature of Black women, of Black men. That history that is not often told in high schools or sometimes in colleges too. And these classes that we are having is they are teaching that history. Another important impact of racism and colonialism and neocolonialism is how black women from Puerto Rico, were being forced to sterilize. They were told that they needed to do appendectomies. And with that, they they were put to sleep, and without their consent, as they were sleeping, they were sterilized by doctors through coercion and deception, lying to them. That's why the doctor and the scissors and the injections go in the painting. Also showing that women were subject to birth control tests for the birth control pills that we have nowadays, thanks to them, to that sacrifice. Nowadays, with the death of George Floyd in 2020, the movement Black Lives Matter became stronger because people went to the streets to continue fighting for the elimination of police brutality, one of many racist forms that we can see nowadays. Free CUNY represents that fight for the open admissions, for the creation of the Black and Puerto Rican studies, so students can feel represented. These open admissions allowed those who didn't have a good quality of education to go to college, continue studying, despite their not good education they had before. Due to the privatization of things, due to the wanting of more money in the coming years, CUNY became to charge tuition. But there is a continuous fight to open the opportunity for students with scholarships teaching this history so we can achieve this again. The Black woman face represents all the fights, the struggles, the anger, the revolutions of Black women, and the literature that we have studied about them, about their situations, about reproductive justice, maternal mortality that is very high in Black women. Sojourner truth, the voices that were not heard and are not often taught by people. The Black woman's face represents all the Black women who were raped, all of the lost cases, the judicial cases Black people lost versus white people. This face represents the suffering, but also the achievements. Having the access to have a voice, and with mobilizations, with protests, this forced sterilization, this fight to eliminate this institutional and structural racism. Nowadays, racism is hidden inside institutions still, inside the government, inside policies, inside the police. And this is a way to exclude them from the society. I decided to do this painting to represent this erasure of history, this hidden history that we have been taught, but for some people and some white people ignore this history. And they sometimes do it intentionally. So this picture shows some of the many ways that racism has been developed, but also the struggles, the fights of the Black people, especially for Black women. This painting doesn't have all of the racism, evolution of racism that we have learned, but at least it shows some of them. And this is the idea to create art, because art can help represent social issues like racism in many ways. And this can create a huge impact in the audience and make them reflect, make them learn about this history. How powerful has been the literature from the personal experiences Black women and their families have suffered. This painting was supported by the strong written documents that Black women have written about how Black communities suffered, especially Black women, struggles and resistance. First, we go to the institution of slavery. In the episode 2 of the podcast, The Economy That Slavery Built, Nicole Hannah Jones narrates the experience of her father, who was born in the times where slaves worked in the cotton plantations. Slaves were exploited and they worked in extreme working conditions, collecting the cotton. This institution of slavery was created by the U.S. government to continue building the economy of the U.S. Slaves were lynched and abused by the white population. With the slavery trade, people were separated from their families as they were sold in different locations. Sojourner Truth's speech, which transcription was done by Varius Robinson, questions how Black women deserved equal rights and that they are not inferior than men. So in this way, she could express that Black women were suffering from sexism and racism at the same time. She mentions, I have heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry as much as any man, and can eat as much too, if I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now. Sojourner Truth was a slave who was exploited and raped. Bell Hooks gathered the phrase, ain't a woman, to express the lack of white women's support for Black women who were in the fight for women's rights, but despite they were women, they did not receive the support due to racism. And also, this shows the lack of support of Black men when they already achieved their voting rights, leaving Black women behind. Apart from racism, which was already terrible, they had to experience sexism. She mentions there is a great stir about colored men getting their rights, but not a word about the colored woman, and if colored men get their rights and not colored women theirs, you see the colored men will be just as bad as it was reminded reminded the American public that sexist oppression was a real threat to the freedom of Black women as racial oppression. Audre Lorde, in the uses of anger, women responding to racism, we can see how she expresses that anger is a form of resistance of Black women. She says that responding to racism means women responding to anger, the anger of exclusion, of unquestioned privilege, of racial distortions, of silence. I'll use stereotyping defensiveness, misnaming, betrayal, and cooptation. With this quote here, she mentions how white people are taught to associate Black women with jobs such as nannying or housewives, and that Black women don't have to fear that anger because it's how they cope with all the sexism and racism they have been experiencing. Having this shared collective anger instead of hiding it, it helped Black women mobilize and fight for their rights and survival.
Audre Lorde also mentions in The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's Tools that it is important to recognize differences between people, but use them to get united and form together a system of support that can help all women fight for their rights all together and fight against patriarchy. She says, in our world, divide and conquer must become define and empower. Another powerful topic shown in the painting is related to Mickey Kendall, who feminism notes from women white feminists forgot: reproductive justice, eugenics, and maternal mortality, which shows the struggles of Black mothers who are the most at risk of dying in pregnancy and losing their babies, due to the past history of racism which continues existing today, having racist doctors and lack of consent of procedures. Also, it mentions how white feminists forget to address the Black women's struggles of not getting access to healthcare, racism leading to health disparities, judgment, abortion issues, lack of resources to support Black moms with babies, people with disabilities sterilization, incarcerated women being sterilized without consent, forced sterilization, which happened in Puerto Rico, supported by US laws to avoid the growth of the Puerto Rican community promoting eugenics, wanting only the desirable to be part of the US without letting the moms know about these procedures, just waking up being sterilized. She says, by confronting the role that racism plays in reproductive health spaces, feminists can help reduce maternal mortality and in turn change the future of many communities. Reproductive justice means not just fighting to defend Planned Parenthood or the Title X family planning program, it also means protecting nutrition programs such as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, because many women rely on these programs to support their families because they weren't allowed to have many opportunities like white people due to the racist history of the US. Neocolonialism is portrayed in the painting with the invasion of Puerto Rico, creating laws to exploit Puerto Ricans and their lands, gathering natural resources, privatizing the island, denying their voting rights, and according to what Laura E. Gomez expressed between lines, there was an assumption that the US was improving Puerto Rican, helping it being developed, one of the many discourses of globalization. Lastly, the Free CUNY phrase in the painting represents the fight of open admissions from Black and Puerto Rican students who didn't have a quality education and were denied to continue their education based on that. Also, they fought for a department in CUNY that represents them like the one of Black and Puerto Rican studies so they can have a voice, teach the topics like the ones of the painting, and inform about the history of marginalized communities. This painting addresses many of the forms racism has taken over time, supported by the US, such as the institution of slavery, white supremacy, the developed sexism and patriarchy, lack of all areas of reproductive justice, maternal and babies' deaths, and a racist healthcare system, judgment and stereotypes, forced sterilization, and the marginalization of students and their opportunities. And finally, racism has taken forms inside the era of neocolonialism. But also, the painting shows the forms of resistances of the Black community, in particular Black women and Black and Puerto Rican students, through anger, mobilizations, speeches, the creation of literature like the one mentioned, and most importantly, they show resistance by informing about their history, their struggles, and their ways of survival inside this racist system. Thank you so much.